hear okay? I know it's very loud at the back. Give me a shout if you can't hear anything. I'm here today to talk to you about IP, intellectual property. I think everyone's kind of heard those words bandied about. Everyone kind of has an idea what it is. And not everyone's really sure what is going on with it, how to manage it, how to best get commercial advantage out of your IP. So I want to talk to you today about some of the things we can do, maybe debunk some of the mysteries around IP and some of the misconceptions that go with it. Generally, do people have a lot of experience with IP? Do people have any experience with IP? Okay, a bit. IP, it's a bit like one of those foreign delicacies when you ask people that, and they all kind of go, yeah, I kind of know what it is, I kind of tried it before, and I'm not really against it, I might try it again. You know, but it's not something to be scared of. I think it's something to embrace, and certainly with where Ireland's going, where the economy's going, and with the knowledge economy, this is where Innovation 2020 is headed, and particularly through IP. Very quickly, IP is this umbrella term that covers a whole load of proprietary rights that you might be generating in your business or in the kind of work that you do, particularly if you're doing innovative research or anything like that. And the main things you would have heard of before are things like patents, trademarks, copyright and design. Don't forget there's other types of intellectual property that will vest in your business and that you could be creating every day and you're not really sure that it's there. And harnessing that and securing that IP is the way that you're going to get commercial advantage. So, there's a lot of talk goes on about IP. You hear a lot of people talking about it today. I'll talk about it for a bit. And there's a lot of misconceptions that go around. There's a lot of old wives' tales that you hear about. Don't believe everything you hear, but do be aware that IP is a massive thing, and that's why everyone's talking about it, and that's why it's so important. Today I thought we'd talk about some of the misconceptions about IP and whether they're true or false. And we might look at some of the questions that we get asked quite a lot as IP advisors from people, particularly people in innovative pipelines and in research organisations. One thing that does come up quite a lot is a lot of people will say there is no intellectual property in my business. There just isn't. I don't run that type of business. It's that kind of thing I do. True or false? False. Okay, there's always IP in your business no matter what you do. Remember that there's the registered rights we talked about and there's unregistered rights, but don't forget things like know-how, trade secrets, databases. Okay, they're all IP that you are putting together, that you're generating every day, that you may not be aware of as part of your business. So when you're looking at things like vacuum cleaners, I know this is a particularly innovative vacuum cleaner and quite an expensive one, but different parts of this product can be covered by different types of IP. So remember that how that vacuum cleaner works might be covered by a patent, or even how a part of that vacuum cleaner works might be covered by a patent. The branding and trademarks might be covered by registered trademarks. You're looking at things like the shape of it and the look of it could be covered by a design. And all the sort of literature and things that were produced to go with that product could be protected by copyright. So when you're thinking that there might be no IP in your business, don't believe it. It is a fallacy. And you need to regularly audit your business to see if you are generating IP, and if you are generating IP, what is that IP, and that it's documented and captured for the benefit of your business. So one of the take-homes today is do an audit of your business, check if there is IP, and if there is IP, check on how you're going to secure it. Another thing that comes up regularly, particularly for people who say they have no IP, is that registration of IP is unnecessary. That's true or false? True and false. Registration of IP is not necessary. So there are forms of IP that do not have to be registered. Things like copyright do not have to be registered. Copyright protection vests once you fix some sort of copyright work. Okay, so that's an automatic right that just comes into existence once you fix the work. There are things like know-how don't have to be registered. Trade secrets don't have to be registered, but you have to be very careful that they're kept confidential. Okay. There are other registered rights, such as patents, registered trademarks, registered designs. So it isn't necessary to register all IP, but registration gives you an exclusive right. Okay? So the exclusive right means that you have a right to stop someone copying what you're doing. In an unregistered IP situation, you have to prove copying, and it is notoriously difficult to prove that somebody has copied you and not come up with something by independent thought. Okay? So just understand the difference between registered right and unregistered right, and registration will give you an exclusive right no matter what. If that person copied you or not, If they come up with it independently, you have an exclusive right in that. Okay? But if it's unregistered, you have to prove copying, and it's notoriously hard to do it. So register your intellectual property if you can. It'll save you having to prove copying at a later date if that's the route you have to go down. Quite often this comes up, and I understand why this comes up. Intellectual property, particularly the registration of it, can be lengthy and it can be expensive. And people are they're generating IP, they're trying to run businesses, they're developing new things, they've got better processes. This is something we'll look at in the future. It's not something we really have time or the money to look at now. So I hear that a lot. How do people feel about that? Fair enough statement? Not really, no. I would go with false on this one, okay? Simply you can't leave it later on because certain rights, certain intellectual property rights will be invalidated from your publication, from publicising the details of it. Particularly you want to think about patent protection and design protection, okay? Those rights are particularly subject to invalidation if you disclose your invention or whatever it is that's protected by your intellectual property, okay? So when you're developing things, you've got to get onto an intellectual property attorney and find out, after you've done your audit, is there intellectual property, should I register it, and should I register it before I disclose it in some way? So do be aware that you could be invalidating your own intellectual property rights by going out, disclosing it, using it, selling it, whatever you're doing with it. If you're taking it out there in a public sense, basically outside wherever you've developed it, you could be running into problems with invalidation later on. So do be aware that you should at least consider your intellectual property, if not start the registration process before you publicise it. And definitely talk to an intellectual property attorney before you do, because they'll guide you in the right direction on what you can and can't do before you can go out and talk about your thing. I understand, everyone needs to get out there, researchers need to publish, business people want to get out and sell things. I understand that. Nobody's saying don't do it. They're just saying go to an intellectual property attorney first and make sure that you have everything captured before you do, so you don't end up in a situation where you're invalidating. Okay? This comes up quite a lot as well, actually. Use or your ownership of intellectual property. Okay? So there's a good mix of people here between individual researchers, people working in industry and companies, people working in state RPOs and things like that. And you're all obviously here because you think you're generating IP in some way. In your job, what you do, you are generating IP and that's all yours to own. True or false? False. Okay? IP generally, just because you're making it, doesn't mean that you own it. Okay? You might be the original creator of it, but it might vest with someone else, particularly with your employer. If you were employed to do that IP generation as a job, your employer will own it. That does not say that you're not an inventor, that does not say you're not an author, it does not say you're not a designer, okay? But it'll rest with employers. You should also be aware that if you're commissioning works, or if you as a business are outsourcing things, that the person who does that for you, the designer or the consultant or things like that, might own the IP and your business won't, okay? So you need to be aware of who owns IP. It's very, very important, because if you don't own it, you can't use it, okay? So it's no good to you. So ensure that IP always vests with your business. Okay, so you need to put contracts in place to make sure that if people are doing things for you under commission or consultancy basis, or even if you have employees, that it does cover IP resting with your business and not being siphoned off somewhere else. This is what everyone wants IP to do, right? It needs to make money, okay? So, true or false, it will generate income. It will, it must do. Everyone's talking about it, it must do, okay? It's true and false though. It does generate income, but the right alone will not do it, okay? The right alone is an exclusive right. It'll stop people from doing things, but it won't do anything for you. You need to commercialise that right. You need to sell it. It's a property. It's a property right. You can sell it, you can transact it, you can mortgage it. A lot of banks won't hear that. So you can do all these things, and that's how it makes money for you. So think about it. You can sell it, which is an assignment. You can lease it out, which is licensing it out to people. Okay, the right to use your intellectual property in return for a cash. You can sell it lock, stock and barrel, you can mortgage it. So don't be aware that the right itself is not going to do anything sitting on your shelf at home. Okay, you have to commercialise it. That's how you do it. Do be aware that when you're going out to commercialise and things like that, of invalidation through public disclosure, particularly people who are using crowdfunding and things like that. Remember that is a public disclosure, and that going and talking to investors and things before doing any of this could invalidate it. So going off and talking about sales and leasing and stuff like that beforehand could cause you problems later on. But do make sure you transact it. It's no good to you sitting in a filing cabinet, okay? You have to transact it to make money. One major thing you really need to be aware about is entry to the market. Okay, everyone wants to hit the market, everyone wants first to market advantage. Totally understand it. But what you got to be aware of when you go out there is that intellectual property is not a license to do something. It's an exclusive right to stop other people doing it. So just because you have intellectual property and you have some registered intellectual property rights does not mean that you have the permission to go out and do that. Somebody else might have intellectual property rights that can stop you doing it. Okay? So it's not a license to do something, it's an exclusive right to stop other people doing it. Alright? So just be aware that just because you have intellectual property, just because you're capturing it and securing it and registering it, doesn't mean you can go out and do it. There could be third parties out there with intellectual property and you could infringe their intellectual property. Okay? Again, talk to an IP advisor. Your intellectual property attorney will tell you about things you can and can't do. Okay? But be aware that if you try and hit the market with somebody else's IP out there, you could be infringing their IP. So don't just be aware of your own IP, be aware of other people's IP, because that's where you can get into a lot of problems. Cool. So the last thing is, people talk about, I don't really need IP because I've got to market, I'm out there, I'm the biggest brand, I'm the best thing that's out there. Do be aware of people flooding the market afterwards. Okay, so without an exclusive right, you can go on and enter the market, but there's nothing stopping anyone following you. Okay, so registering IP, using your IP will give you sustained market advantage. So once you get into the market, you can keep people out of it. But without the IP, you can't stop counterfeits, knockoffs, anyone copying you. Finally, we hear this a lot. There's a lot to remember. I completely get it. There's a lot to do with IP. There's a lot to do with commercializing it. So I totally agree with you. It is true. So what we've done is we've gotten together with KTI and we have developed a guide for managing intellectual property, which is available. There's copies of this available on our stand if you want any copies of it. It's also available online. But we've put down some practical tips on what you can do to manage your IP and your confidential information and how you can get the best out of it and get commercial success out of it. There's copies over our stand at stand 19 at the F. Kelly stand. Barry's here, he's talking later on at 1:20 about the IP protocol. 1:20, yeah. Barry's here from KTI, from Knowledge Transfer Ireland, and he'll be talking about the IP protocol later on. You might want to go to that, there's some information on that. And we'll also tell you how this guide can help you implement the IP protocol for anyone who's working in research organisations. That's it.
Hang on for one more. So I'd like to thank Donal.